Hi everyone. So I wanted to talk today about legitimate suffering. There is a quote by Carl Jung that says that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Um, so this means that any time that you feel overwhelmed or that you feel depressed or that you have a low level anxiety, that this means that there is something along the line throughout your life that you have not allowed yourself to feel. There is some suffering that you have just stomped all over. And this is a very common trick that we learn in childhood, and it's a very useful trick because it allows us as children who are not quite well equipped enough to deal with our own emotions, and especially if we don't have a parent or a carer who can also help us to negate our emotions, um, it helps us to suppress our emotions for very good reason, because a child is not equipped enough. We just don't know how to. We don't know how to deal with it. Sometimes it's not always accepted by the adults in our life. It's not socially acceptable. It's not convenient for you to cry in classroom. You know, how many children get told, stop crying, grow up, be a good girl, stop crying, or be a good boy. So these are tricks that we learn how to survive. They're survival mechanisms. If we were all kind of brought up in a world where our feelings were really nurtured and supported and seen and honored, and we had an adult who could maybe help us to understand how we're feeling, then that would be a completely different scenario. So many of us will grow up having learned how to suppress our feelings at a very early age, and this will continue on in adulthood. And so it means that next time somebody, maybe a close family member or a close partner or someone upsets you, instead of actually dealing with it, feeling it, recognizing it, honoring it, we will then just suppress like we always did, and we kind of keep on putting it back into the shadow, back into the unconscious. We don't want to look at it, but it doesn't go away. It stays there. It festers away, and it keeps popping its head up at inconvenient times, or even convenient times. It will just keep on showing itself to you. It will show itself through your problems in your relationships. It will show itself through your sudden outbursts of rage and anger. It will show itself in your depression, your anxiety, the problems that you have in your relationships, whether they be with partners or with family. They will show themselves in the way that you view the world, in your perceptions, in the things that keep you up at night, in your inability to reach your goals, in your inability to create positive working relationships, in your inability to keep a job, blah 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 blah. Any problem that you have, that the basis of your problem, you'll find some unconscious shadow material which is guiding all of that. And so this is really why it's so important to do your shadow work, which means to know yourself. And once you know yourself, you know your boundaries. Then you know what your triggers are. You know what you need. You know what you don't need. You know the boundaries that you need to put up around yourself. And you might not know these things first of all straight away, but over time you will get to know what they are, and they might change over time as well, because we change. And so as you change, you're going to change the way that you need people to respond to you. And so you will need to kind of keep on assessing, because shadow work really does, it becomes a way of negating the world. It becomes a way of life, a way of dealing with certain situations, a way of making right. Because I think that one of the most important things we have to do in our life is to recognize our own potential, is to know who we truly are. And I think actually without that, life becomes quite dull. It becomes quite I don't know, empty. It becomes quite empty without that. And also with knowing yourself, with knowing your limits and knowing your potential, and by reaching your potential, you then increase your self confidence and your self esteem and your inner vision of who you are. the inner image of who we are sort of increases or decreases in terms of how well or badly we think of ourselves. And that's reflected in the things that we do on, on the outside, the things that we do for other people, the way that we interact. Are they successful interactions? Are we happy? Are we confident? Are we comfortable? Are we able to integrate? Are we able to sort of integrate into society, into our communities? Are we able to be successful in our friendships and all of that kind of has an impact on how we see ourselves. And so if we keep on failing in our lives, if we keep on saying, oh shit, I can't keep a job, I'm not doing well with my money, I haven't got any friends, no one wants to go out with me, all of this, I'm failing. I feel like I'm failing in every hurdle. What's wrong with me? It could just be that you've got so much shadow stuff going on, so much shadow content that you haven't looked at yet, that you don't realize what is guiding your life. And what is guiding your life, for all of us, is usually unconscious. And so this is why the work is so important. And as I've said many times before, this is work that you don't have to buy into anything. This is work that you can do on your own. There's plenty of information out there. There's information on my website, on lots of other people's websites. And you can find to do it yourself, but it really is about taking time, being alone, sitting with yourself, contemplating, thinking, being quiet, being still, being out in nature, observing the tiniest. Observe an ant for 5 minutes. Observe the way it moves and where it's going and what it's doing, and perhaps the trail that followed behind it. Take that time to reconnect. The whole thing about legitimate suffering is that if we keep on suppressing, we also we become into a pattern of not being able to feel anymore. Our body becomes quite numb, and so we have to reawaken our connection to our body and to ourselves and to our instincts, and that is a whole journey in itself. One thing that I found very important in my journey was the mindfulness meditation. So to really sort of, in meditation, through guided meditation, to consider your eyes, the tension in your eyes, relax the tension in your eyes. You think, shit, I didn't realize I had tension in my eyes. Or relax the tension in your forehead. You didn't realize that you had it there. Or your ears, you start paying attention to your ears. How do they feel? They feel hot and cold. These are the small things that we don't pay attention to. In some ways, I found in my own life that I was very much disconnected from my body. I'm very much all up here. I'm always thinking, so my thinking takes away from my feeling, and so I have to purposely get back into my body. And another thing that really helped me with this, more than anything else, actually, was Reiki. Because through Reiki, you have to go back into the body. You have to feel where your chakras are. You have to understand where the energy points are. You have to look and feel where you're keeping your energy, where you're keeping your armoring, your negative energies, and not just for yourself, but also for other people. Because I'm a Reiki master now, and so whenever I do something called psychic surgery, which is really very good, and it includes kind of going through scanning the person's body. And I do this because I'm actually using my hands almost like claws, kind of going through the body like that to see where in that person's body they're holding tension, they're holding their armoring, and then also to release that. And so when you do this, you become very sensitive. You become very sensitive of your body, very aware of energy, where I can feel the energy between my two hands, let's just say. But by doing this, you can start to kind of feel different things. And if you do it on somebody else as well, also, you can start to feel where their aura is, and where their energy kind of ends and where yours begins. So through all of that, through those kind of practices, through mindfulness meditation, through Reiki practice, you can then start to feel how your body feels. The other thing is, and I did talk about this a couple of years ago, I think now, was Messages from the Unconscious, which was the name of my art exhibitions that I had in Ireland a few years ago, because then it was looking at kind of my shadow work journey through my artwork. But messages from the unconscious are the messages that your body gives. So your unconscious speaks to you through your visions, your visions, your daydreams, your dreams, your fantasy. If you imagine your fantasy like your best case scenario, or your happy place, or your worst case scenario, these are all messages from the unconscious. These are all kind of messages to you because they come up. You don't kind of consciously think, okay, I'm gonna think of something now. I'm gonna imagine that a really, really nice place. It's not that. It's, oh, what's my happy place? Oh yeah, it's that. Yeah, it's that place. It's that place that I've been to before. It's something that I recognize. And the other thing is that with the unconscious, it can just give you images, it can just give you symbols. And these are the ones to really pay attention to, the ones that just come without any kind of conscious creation. They're the ones that are messages. These are ones that that come from somewhere that you haven't seen, that you've suppressed, that you don't want to look at. Those are important ones. The other way that your unconscious speaks to you is through your body. Your body is always speaking to you. It's talking to you when it gives you a headache. It gives it to you when you're constipated. It gives it to you whenever you feel pain, tension, irritability, when you feel stuck, when you are sick. Your body is constantly communicating with you, but can you hear it? Do you pay attention? When you become emotional, what do? Do you stamp all over it? Do you put your chin up and carry on? If you feel like crying, do you allow yourself that time? Do you allow yourself the privilege of crying? Do you know how important it is to cry? I have been struggling the past year and a half with crying. Okay, so I haven't been able to cry. I've felt like I needed to cry, but I can't. It just doesn't come. And this, I know from my own experience, and I'm telling you this because I think it would be helpful for anyone else who's been through the same thing, is that I was one of those children who suppressed. From a very early age, I learned how to suppress all my emotions. There was no place for them. And so this continued on in my adulthood. It continued on in my relationships, my failed relationships. And until quite recently, not recently, well, the last maybe 8 years really, the last 8 years that I've been working on myself, that I've been doing my shadow work, that I've been allowing myself to feel. I had a situation about a year and a half ago where I got very, very upset. Okay, I'm talking like hot tears that won't stop, that kind of upset. And for me, I'm very much I'm very in control of myself most of the time. And so when this happened to me, I think what happened was I got so scared of it. I was so scared of that overwhelming emotion that I then suppressed. I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's going to, not consciously. I don't think I consciously did it, but I think I just went back into that. No, I'm not doing that anymore. There's no room for that now. In the same way that I would have done as a child. And so in this way, we can see that shadow work doesn't really stop. Like we can have, these are complexes that will kind of continue on throughout my life. This would be something that I'll have to be very aware of. And that's why shadow work is so important, because it's all about know thyself, me knowing who I am, what my triggers are, what my problems are, what I'm going to struggle with, how I'm going to deal with that. The way that I have dealt with it is that if I get any glimmer of emotion, and it happened 2 days ago when I was watching TV. I was watching a documentary, and it was some kind of a union, and suddenly I just started crying, and like my mum was like, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong?" But so it's like, even if it's inconvenient, even if it comes at the most inconvenient time, I know that I have to allow myself, I have to allow my body to do that, because I'm in such a pattern of not allowing that emotion to come up, that I know that I now have to counteract it. And this is another thing that I found with shadow work throughout, is that whatever it is that we're scared of is exactly the thing that we have to do. When I did my course in Carl Jung psychology with art therapy in 2014, the very last thing I ever wanted to do was do a course. I did not want to do anything like that. I was consciously putting myself in a situation that I knew could possibly trigger a panic attack. I knew it, and I was thinking, right, I read enough I'd read enough bullshit, and I'd read enough wisdom also. The bullshit was from the New Age community, and the good stuff, the wisdom, was from the alternative research community. And so I knew that I had to meet my fears head on. Okay, and I had a huge complex about education, and it had stopped me. It had stopped me in my life at that time. It had stopped me from progressing. And so to do that course was a huge thing. And I remember thinking to myself, if they are all sitting in a circle, don't know if I can go into that room. And of course they were all sitting in a circle, and so I had to go and sit down. And in that way, by taking those chances, and within that course, I did have a few panic attacks, but it was in meeting that. It was in meeting the thing that I'm scared of. That's how we grow. And I've been working with children for the past 20 odd years now, and I've been in other situations that I think other people might have panic attacks about, but for me it was always a classroom. And I've worked even in schools since. I've worked in schools even before and since, and I always hated schools. And now I allow myself the privilege of saying I won't work in a school again because I just don't like them. But this was about my complex. That this whole thing about me going into a classroom was, as a student, was about this complex, and so meeting it head on was really important. And it relates now to a dream that I had quite recently, about meeting my fears, and I'll just talk about it briefly. But the dream that I had was that I was on a boardwalk on top of the water, and I saw a big fat toad, a big fat ugly toad at the bottom, and I said, "Oh, look at this!" And the person who I was with kind of walked past me with a huge bag of a bin liner full of crap, and he knocked me into the water with his big bag of crap, and the water took me very deep within it, and there was an island in the middle, and the island was black. It was like a black rock, and I got sucked into the black rock in this dream. And in the dream I got very, very scared, and I thought, oh my god, where am I going to run? I need to run. So I started running, and then I stopped. I became conscious in the dream, and I turned around and I faced whatever it was that was there. Because what I had done previously to that is I thought to myself, should I have a dream again where I'm being pursued or I'm scared, I'm going to stop and I'm going to face that fear, whatever it is, I'm going to face it. And so I became conscious enough in the dream to do that. And I was what's the word, paralyzed. It was like a sleep paralysis. I couldn't move my body awake. But because I know that, because when I was trying to wake myself up, I was like having to move my fingers and toes first, and then my hands, and then my arms, and then, okay, got the feeling back in my body now, I can move. But I faced that fear. So at first I was running, screaming, and then I stopped and I faced whatever it was, and I screamed at it, rather than like screamed terror. I screamed at it. So that was different. The funny thing about this dream is it left me feeling very, although I didn't like the sleep paralysis bit and that there was some fear in it, there was also some development, conscious development in it as well, unconscious and conscious. Consciously, there was a feeling of development in some way of mastery, some way that I had gone above my, what I had done before. And dreams can be very good that way. They can really give us an opportunity to develop something. And I think especially if there's a conscious knowledge, like there was with me, there was a conscious knowledge that I needed to face my fears. The dream almost gave me that opportunity. Now I had an opportunity there. I could have just continued running and just woken myself up, but I didn't. I took that opportunity to face whatever it was. And so if you're ever able to do that in that kind of situation, in whether dream or in your waking life, whatever it is you're scared of, know what it is, know what your fears are, and decide for yourself how are you going to meet those fears. Because really, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario for me going into that course that day and for the subsequent months afterwards, that the worst case scenario was that I could have a panic attack. For me, that was my biggest fear. I didn't want to embarrass myself. I didn't want to seem stupid. I didn't want to have a panic attack. They were my three. And um and yeah, and I just kept on trying to push myself into into my fears, really, into new territory for me. And I think that that's the way that we grow and develop. And I've been working with children for many years, and I know that when you give a child, if you push them a bit further, if you say, oh, we go up that high, and just let them know what their fears are, what the possible risk is, because there's, risk in play is really important. But if you allow the child to know what their risk is, and let them make the decision themselves, and let them know that you believe they can do it, you see how much they develop through that. They develop, sometimes, fine motor or gross motor skills, but also in terms of their self-esteem. When they learn something, when they push past their fears, they learn something. It's exactly the same for adults. How can it be any different? We just forget how to. We forget how to do those kinds of things, and they're really important to keep on playing and to keep on learning and pushing past our fears, and to do it in a playful way. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, first of all, this reconnecting with the body, and that there are very many ways that you can, and just be in contemplation with the body, and to give it time, to allow yourself to feel the things that you feel, to write them down, to recognize them, to note them, to decide where they come from. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, when we're in this kind of loop of shadow work, when it becomes a way of life, when we're doing the work, there comes periods of time in our life where we can become overwhelmed with feeling, with emotion, especially when we're looking at we're unearthing old traumas and looking at them again and reevaluating them, and we are remembering, re-putting back together. And also, sometimes what I found is that I remembered things that I didn't know actually ever happened. It's not like I thought, oh, I forgot about that. It's like, I had realizations of things that happened that I have no other memory of. It's not like I remembered them when I was, say, 10, and then I forgot about them again. I just absolutely, unless I've really lost my memory, that could also be the case. But I was remembering things which were quite shocking to me, through the very beginning of my shadow work, and also, even more recently, there are still revelations. There are still ways that I'm learning to understand myself and who I am, what my motivations are, where my shadow is still kind of, in the driver's seat sometimes. And so that's also, that's also the journey. This is the journey. As long as if we can start it, we can start this self-evaluation. We can continue on and keep on growing with it. It doesn't make life all lovely and flowers and pretty and happily ever after. Unfortunately, life isn't like that. Life is a series of tests. They call it the Divine Comedy. I've heard of this thing, Divine. I've never seen it. Divine Comedy, Dante's Divine Comedy. Well, it's the perfect title for any of our lives. Fucking, the paradox. And when you see, it's like we are. There's so much duality in everything. There's so much duality in us. And it's in that kind of, if you continue to keep this persona, this shiny persona of the person that we try to show to the world, without being very true to the darker aspects of who we really are, you've only kind of got one side of the story. Having said that, the persona is actually very important also, because, obviously I'm not going to come on here and record myself at my very worst, feeling angry and cross and shouting. I'm going to show my best face forward, as we all do. But obviously it's about knowing our darkness. It's about knowing who we really are, what's guiding us, where we can be negative, jealous, angry, bitter, resentful, where we can be manipulative, in the small things. Sometimes if you're not the kind of person who recognizes those things, you would never know that about yourself. Someone would tell you that you're being manipulative and you'd just be defensive. Someone like me, who's been doing this for many years, will say, oh, hang on now. Well, am I? Or is that your projection? And then start looking at it from that point of view. And that's, I think, the far healthier way to see it, is to kind of recognize that it could be they could be right. This person's saying this person knows me very well. I need to look and see, are they correct? And it could take some time. You can't just kind of, quickly just have a little. It could take weeks, could take days, whatever. Take the time that you need to analyze it and look at it. But then at the same token, it can be also their projection, and so you have to also be careful of that. Also, the other thing I was going to say about this was when you're looking at these harder, more difficult, darker parts of the personality, of your own personality, the truth of who you are, you should also have some kind of safety net. And so you should be very aware that through this process, you're going to be going deeper into maybe some traumas, some problems that you've had in the past. They could be very difficult to deal with. And if they are very difficult to deal with, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if you become very overly emotional? If you become, if you feel so bad that you could fall into a depression that could end up having a negative impact on your health and well-being, there is a possibility of that with shadow work. I'm not going to lie about this. You have to be aware that when you're unpeeling the layers of conditioning, when you are looking for the truth of yourself and of the world that you live in, there are going to be times that are going to be very dark. When you're looking at your traumas, your triggers, your upsets, when you realize that you are not quite as wonderful as you thought you possibly were, when you realize that you're high in narcissistic traits, perhaps, or low, whenever you realize some of those things, it can be a very emotionally challenging time. And so what are you going to do to save yourself then? Well, my suggestion is that you mind yourself, that you monitor how you feel and what you're going to do about them. So it's really good if you've got someone who you trust, who you can trust you can confide in, you can talk to. That is really the best case scenario. You need to have someone that you trust who will listen, who will help you. The other thing is, as I said, mind yourself. And it means that when you're very emotional, and that you can't quite cope with it, you stop. And this is also a good time for distractions, that you look for other things to do, other things to think about. But the other thing is you need to decide what they're going to be. If the thing that you love to do is, I don't know, exercise, art making, going for a walk, whatever, bike riding, going for a drive, meeting up with your friends, going for a drink, whatever it is, make sure that you do those things that you need to do to keep yourself okay. Especially, like if you have, most adults have got a lot of responsibilities. Society puts these responsibilities, rent to pay, jobs to keep, family to look after, yourself to look after. So make sure that you have got backup and that you mind yourself, that you don't allow yourself to go too deep, too far, too fast without support. The other thing is I want to talk about why the process of shadow work is important, because actually you think to yourself, well, what's the bloody point then? It sounds awful. I'm going to drag up all my own shit, and then I'm going to be left with feeling really emotional. What's the point in that? The point in that is that if without doing the shadow work, you will constantly live your life based on the conditioning, the social and cultural conditioning that you've grown up with. You are probably going to be unautonomous. You're probably going to be not very independent. You will not know yourself. You will not know what kind of boundaries to put up with other people. You might be high or low in narcissistic traits. We don't know. You may or may not suffer in your relationships. There are so many reasons why you should do it. There are so many reasons why you should self-reflect and turn things over and ask yourself the question, why? There are so many reasons why you should know yourself. I mean, if you look at any sort of hermetic wisdom or any kind of esoteric teachings, you will see, and even a lot of religion will say that knowing yourself is the highest source of wisdom. Understanding your own divinity, understanding that you are. I don't know. I guess this is really up for discussion. The most I can say is knowing yourself. however it is you see yourself, because there are some people who won't see themselves in the kind of the spiritual capacity. They may not kind of develop a spiritual practice. I do actually think that developing a spiritual practice is also a great part of the process. You know, whether it just be very much the spiritual practice could just be you taking time to do this kind of work. Whatever else you find, you know, whether it's religion or whatever other kind of organized spirituality, or whether it's just your connection with nature, I think actually, to be honest, that is the highest form of wisdom, is your connection to self, your connection to nature, and actually the two are the same. Your connection to self is your connection to nature. And that's another reason why it's so important for people to spend time in nature, to be out there, to walk in bare feet, to feel the grass, to look and see the animals and how they interact and what they do, be guided by them, because they haven't been disconnected from their intuition yet. I hope they never are. One of the reasons why I realised that I didn't have strong connection to my own intuition was one day while I was watching some cows. I had some cows in the field near where I used to live, and I was watching them, and I was watching the way that they interact with each other, and how the bull was very, very affectionate towards the young cows. He was licking them. Obviously his own, I'm sure there were about 3 or 4 different female cows there too. And I was watching them as a family, and I recognized how the male was always sitting with the young and always sort of like licking them and pruning them, and how the younger calves would go into the other field in the evening, underneath the electric fence, under the river and underneath the electric fence, and they'd go kind of like dancing on the other field, like you can't catch me kind of thing. They were really playful. And they wouldn't really play during the day, they'd only play in the evening. So I was recognizing all these things about these cows. I was kind of really watching, and I also noticed how they were scared of humans. And I thought, you really should be, because you're going to be on someone's plate soon. You know, I don't eat animals, I'm not vegetarian, but I was thinking, this is, I was thinking about how awful it is, that they trust the farmer that ends up killing them in the end. So I noticed that they all had their instincts intact. They were working from instincts. If I went anywhere near them, they'd all stand up and walk away, and rightfully so, because they knew deep down that that the human was a potential threat. And I thought to myself, where's my instinct? And I couldn't feel it, and it took me a long time to really connect back into that. And the way that I did that was through being in nature, by really sitting and recognizing and watching and observing, and through doing that, and also through my own spiritual practice, which is, for me, which is Reiki, which is the self work that I do, which is the meditation that I do. That's how I've been able to connect back into my own body and my own feeling. And I know that I always have a problem with allowing myself to feel, to go into my emotions when they come up, especially if it's inconvenient. And so I have to allow myself. I have to consciously say, "Oh, this is what I know I struggle with." I have to then allow myself to do that. This is how you work with who you are and what you are. This is how you know who you are and what you are. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope it's been useful. Take care.